Hey, Nicole Huntsman here from moderncosmic.com. I've got your weekly forecast. This is for the week of December 6th through December 12th. So today, as I'm recording this is actually December 6th today. I apologize, I'm a little behind. I have been looking at this week, this chart, actually for a few weeks now. I really have been focusing, of course, on putting together the forecast this past week, but this is a big week. This is the week that we have our moon moves into Sagittarius, so we'll have a new moon in Sagittarius on the same day, right around the same time that we have Mars moving into position to square Uranus and Pluto. Of course, later on this month, around Christmas time, we also have another exciting day when we have our full moon, our Capricorn Cancer full moon, which will also be a very important week. So this is a volatile week. This is one with a lot of events that are unexpected and unpredictable. And so we're going to start and sort of watch how this evolves and unfolds. We'll start with Sunday. Today is Sunday. It should be noted that from last week, as a recap, I talked about there being a big news day on Tuesday. And although it wasn't one where we didn't really get to hear a lot about it on the news, when I talk about world events, I'm mainly interested in the United States, sort of our military action and our international relations with other countries, of course. And of course, as is relevant right now, the issues with ISIS and with terrorists and other countries that are out there that are sympathizers, or people who are stateside who are sympathizers who are looking to do us harm. So those are relevant, and to those of us who are here in the United States and our allies. I'm interested in seeing how astrology can show us the movements of these groups of people. So this past week, Tuesday, we had, the United States did make an announcement. The Department of Defense made an announcement that they were sending 50 special ops troops, like Navy SEALs type troops, over to Syria to do some reconnaissance and some, Navy SEALs missions, the things that they do that are pretty amazing. I really respect those soldiers. I think they're very badass, so I'm excited about that. And so that was an announcement that was important. We didn't hear much about it on the news, and I do speculate. I know Barack Obama has said before he wouldn't put any more troops, overseas while he was in administration. And so in my mind, it was kind of a little bit hushed. But either way, I'm not to be a conspiracy theorist, but we didn't hear much about it. But it is an important bit of news relative to the astrology that I look at as well. And then we had on Wednesday, we had an event where we had a very sad, tragic, brutal, unnecessary. I do not understand where this comes from, with this desire to kill innocent people. But we sadly did have this happen here in the United States, and it was something that we saw in the astrology. So this next week is actually shaping up to be one that is even more. You've got this combination of people being in a state of polarity here in the United States. There's a high degree of polarity where you've got people coming from two different sides, and we're seeing it with people who are coming from the left side who are wanting gun control, people who are coming from the right side who are, not wanting gun control, and they're wanting to fight Islam. And I'm not saying that this is everyone on the right is blaming this on all Muslims, but you are seeing this rhetoric that is on both sides that's coming from a place of emotion and reactivity rather than the facts. And so it's a little bit, it makes things hairy, scary, it makes things chaotic, and the emotional climate, because it is reactive. I'm glad that right now our government has been under a transit with Saturn, which has kind of kept us somewhat, like I've said, reserved and holding back. And actually Barack Obama himself has just undergone a big Saturn transit to his moon this past year that has, sort of held him in place a bit, and it also was making some aspects to his sun as well. So that's the thing that's kind of, I think, kept him a little bit more circumspect in his measures. So I'm not really into politics. I'm like a politically agnostic, I suppose. I'm just here to sort of report on the things that I'm seeing and how they might be affecting us. All right, Sunday, December 6th. I've really been taking a look at these charts relative to the nation and relative to some of the other countries out in the world. And this, Obama I heard an announcement last night that he was going to be speaking today on Sunday as I'm recording this. Sorry, I'm getting it to you guys a little bit late. I've just been slammed with clients. So, but at any rate, with My thoughts are from through Saturday this last week. I think Friday and Saturday this weekend overseas. I think there were probably some missions that were completed that were successful that we haven't heard about yet because of obviously the nature of needing to keep them secure, the troops and whatnot that are over there. I think today, though, and I think also with Obama announced he's going to speak today, and I actually had put this together. Of course, this is the first day of the week, so I already had this part of the forecast done. And I did mention something about that we've got early this afternoon in Washington, D.C., that there would be a moon conjunct Mars and Libra, and that was going to conjunct the national Saturn in the 10th house. And so that's the 10th house for a nation. That is the seat of authority. And Saturn is also the leadership, and it rules the 10th house, of course. And so to me, this is the president himself. The sun is also somewhat the president, but to me, really, that 10th house Saturn says that's the president. So having that activated by Mars and the moon suggests perhaps him, and the moon is the public, so him speaking to the public. And here we have it. So that's what I actually had talked about for this weekend. Also, I'd mentioned there is an activation of sort of this national fear of us losing our authority in the world. This somewhat painful period for the administration, a time where they're definitely getting down to business. There's a lot of planning to do. They've obviously been planning, but especially the Capitol and the Department of Defense, once we had that event happen here in the United States on Wednesday, they're definitely trying to, if you've watched the news, they've been really trying to kind of play things off as, it was a workplace violence issue, or it was, something interpersonal, but not necessarily political or anything that was extremist or terrorist. But of course, anyone that goes in and shoots up a room of innocent people is performing a terrorist act. I don't care where you're from or what you believe. So to get to the bottom of this, as far as astrology goes, the way we see these things in astrology, we look for specific alignments with the current cosmic weather and how those affect the national chart, how those affect, if you're looking at your personal life, how they affect your chart. Also, this week we've got Venus today is going to be moving on Sunday, moving into Scorpio. Scorpio is the zodiac sign that's ruled by Mars traditionally, but also, in modern times ruled by Pluto. So Scorpio is a zodiac sign that's very intense, and it's a time of, you got your Venus is what you value. And Mars is this Scorpio is a zodiac sign that has to do with extremes. It's life and death, and it is war. It's Pluto. Pluto rules explosions and war, and so does Mars. So this is a time to suggest it could be a time where there's people's values take on this even more polarized feel, okay? Also, when you look at the ruler of Scorpio is Pluto. And Pluto right now is in Capricorn, transiting the sky. And this is important as well, because this is Capricorn. Pluto to me has always meant sort of those big, powerful organizations, governments, even banks, those who have the power to sort of shift the tides of our economy and things like that. So, and that Pluto is currently opposite our sun. So this to me says the time where we will be actively engaged and involved in some sort of conflict, which obviously, clearly we are. This week in particular, though, that Venus also, as it moves into Scorpio, we don't know ISIS's exact time that they announced their caliphate. I've seen many different opinions. I personally have them as a noon chart, and to me, it makes the most sense. To me, that chart, where everything falls, it seems correct to me. It gives them a 0-degree Leo moon. This Scorpio, even if they are a Cancer moon, this Venus will have transited their moon at some point, either yesterday or the day before, or today or so. So anyway, my point being, if they're having a square to their Venus, they're having a square from that Scorpio Venus to their moon, there's an activation there of their moon. And because the nature of being in Scorpio, it suggests conflict of some kind, okay? Now, let's talk about also, I've got to look at my notes here. We've got, as well, the ruler of the Libran Saturn in the national chart, okay, would be Venus. And our Venus is in Cancer, and it's in the 7th house of international relations. So this tells us that there is activation to our international relations. And as you know, the 7th house also, when you look at a national chart, is us working with other countries. And we know this, okay? This is happening. This is not anything new. What's important to note as well, though, the Venus in Scorpio, it's moving into the 11th house of the national chart. It is trining, sorry, I'm looking at the chart as I'm talking to you. So it is into the 11th house trining the Venus in Cancer. Our Venus in Cancer, I believe, is at about 3 degrees. So trining it, and then you've got, at the same time, this tells us that we've got conversations with ambassadors or diplomats from the NATO alliance that are talking about what to do. The legislators also, there is a suggestion that they will be approving funding for continued military, like ramping up our contributions to the military effort over there to fight ISIS. Monday, December 7th, we've got a few aspects lining up. We've got our moon conjunct Venus in Scorpio. Of course, our Venus is in Scorpio now, and it's going to be trining our Neptune in Pisces. So this is a time where it could be a little bit of a, talk about amping up kind of people's delusions or conspiracies or their detachment from reality. It could play out in this, in this way. It's kind of the overall sort of fuzzy feeling we'll have on Monday. Also, it's a spiritual time. So what's really tough about Neptune is it's not only this detachment from reality into this more shadow side, it's also a spiritual sort of detachment from reality. So, and at the same time, we've got with our Neptune that's in Pisces and our Sagittarius Saturn, people are on this sort of rhetoric bandwagon. They are on this, what is the meaning of life bandwagon. Everybody seems to be jumping on their own different bandwagon. So I guess there are different versions of this, 2 different trains, I think, trains of thought, and plus then some. So, but people are more opinionated right now about what they think about religion and meaning of life and spirituality and borders and us versus them, nations, borders, these types of things are all these big issues that people are worried about right now. So on Monday, there will be just further kind of detachment from reality and this move into emotion because it's the moon. So the moon, when it makes a lovely little trine to Neptune, it's going to make it even more, and it's in Scorpio. Scorpio is very opinionated. Scorpio is like, it is this or it is this, okay? And it is the moon in Scorpio, when I look at in our national chart, so let me pull this up here, get the little transits going. On our national chart, that moon is going to brush by. It'll make a trine to our Venus, and it'll make a trine to our Jupiter, which are in Cancer in the 7th house. This is that house of, remember, foreign relations and us working with other countries. When the moon is transiting our 10th house, that's the moon in the national chart, the transiting moon, is going to talk, it's going to speak a little bit to, yes, the emotional climate, but also sort of the emotional climate of the public, okay? And so there's a suggestion here, there will be people discussing perhaps what the president talked about on Sunday, and people disagreeing with it. We're definitely going to hear a lot of, we got your Mercury. The Mercury is all up in the mix here, of course, with it making that quincunx to the national Mercury. So definitely we're going to hear a lot of discussion, a lot of Sagittarius Mercury just talks and talks and talks and talks. It just tells you what it thinks. It's opinionated, not from the same place that Scorpio is opinionated. It's just kind of like it's like a lot of hot air sometimes. So just expect more political pundits and this type of thing on Monday. It could also be a day where people feel a little bit of fatigue, like to the whole situation, like battle fatigue, but relative to dealing with this discussion of, again, terrorism, and people sort of withdrawing a bit. Now, Monday is an important day because there are some things that are lining up that were of concern or were of note. First of all, we have the Libra Mars, which is that desire for collaboration, and it can also represent sort of fighting relations. It is making a sextile to the Sagittarius Sun. That is somewhat of an optimistic and even naive sun. It's one that's, progressive, and it's leaning towards the future, but it can also be a little bit too quick to take action, or it can be without, knowing all the facts first. And so, especially when you look at the Jupiter, which Jupiter rules Sagittarius, you look at Jupiter's in Virgo, which to me, I always think of analysts and people giving advice. And I feel like the sun is representing sort of the leadership, and it's like they're not really listening to one another. Okay. They're kind of almost squaring each other. So, that's problematic. Now, the sun is moving away from Saturn. So to me, as that Sagittarius sun, it's parting and moving away from Saturn, the transiting Saturn, we will see more action being taken. And it's going to accelerate this. It's going to be accelerated because it's sort of unpredictably, because especially as that sun moves into position, it's going to trine Uranus, which is obviously our planet of unpredictable, things. The sun represents, the world. And then Uranus is like unpredictability, just overall on the world stage. And then Mars will move into position, and Mars actually will be sextiling the sun, because Mars is, in Libra. So it makes a little asymmetrical, sort of unstable triangular formation. This to me is like powerful forces joining together to fight for freedom, and they're using military action. Their aim is to get to a place of peace, but it's going to require conflict initially. So we're going to see some things amped up, I believe, on Monday. Also, we have Mars that moves into position to create this highly destabilized T-square with Uranus, which is in Aries, as it has been for quite a while now, and our Capricorn Pluto. So Uranus and Aries, remember, think of that as this electric, unpredictable, it can be rebellious energy. It's all about transformation, but it's not like the Plutonian transformation. It's different. It's more this doing what it is you want to do, striking it out on your own, regardless of what anyone else wants you to do, regardless of what the status quo has been. It's like starting with your own version of how you think things should go down. So this is why we're seeing terrorists they're rebels, they are renegades, they're the ones that have like hijacked their religion, okay? They're trying to take charge. It is Pluto, squaring Pluto, and Pluto is in Capricorn. Pluto in Capricorn is power, that's Pluto. Capricorn is large organizations. So you see, it's the renegades fighting against the large organizations. You have Mars move into position in Libra. Mars in Libra is joining forces with others to actively cause something to happen, okay? And to me, it's conflict. You join that with Pluto and Uranus, and this is military conflict. This is lining up on the United States Saturn, which is in the 10th house, the house of authority, the house of Washington, D.C., the house of the president, the house of the administration. Now, it's also our national security in a sense. The second house is kind of more security, but 10th house, because it's the government, and you've got Saturn there, this shows where our fear is at. We're afraid of losing our authority to act as a world power. So you have Mars come here, it's activating that fear, okay? And in my mind, there could be some sort of a conflict on Monday, whether it's stateside or not, I'm not sure. I don't really know for sure. As you look at more things in our chart and in other charts, such as ISIS's chart, it's suggested that perhaps it could be, or it could be troops over, that are actually overseas fighting the terrorists, that perhaps some of our troops are hurt. But it also suggests that it's a day of mourning. Mars to Saturn shows national pain. So, we're going to have to wait and see. Hopefully we don't have more of these events happen that we've been having. But at the same time, it needs to be noted that Mars, that transiting Mars, is squaring the sun of the United States, and it's lining up in such a way that it's squaring that sun, and that sun is opposing the transiting Pluto. So it's making a Mars-Pluto, United States, the sun, T-square. And that United States sun is in our 7th house. It's our house of us, it's us as a country, but it's also us relative to our relationship with our foreign allies. So, I don't know if one of our allies will be hurt perhaps by some sort of military action taken upon them, and then we are called to defend them. That's a possibility, okay? Now, let's see. We've got also, make sure I'm not forgetting anything. Oh, very important, yes. We've got that Mars that moves into position with the, of course, that's conjoining our national Saturn. It is also, all of this is also taking place. The Pluto, that's the transiting Pluto, it's conjunct the cusp of the 2nd house. So Pluto, that's transiting, is about to move into our 2nd house. Remember, the 2nd house is our seat of security relative to our economic system. So our economy is about to undergo a huge transformation, and Pluto's going to be there for quite a while. Pluto's been moving through our 1st house for the past, it's been there for, without looking at the ephemeris, I don't even know how long, but it's been there for quite a long time, since I'm going to guess 2000s, early 2000s. And it's moving into our 2nd house and will be there for, again, a long enough stretch of time that it's going to affect huge changes in the way that our economy is built and is structured. So, when we look at the ruler of our 2nd house, that's Saturn. Okay, that's what's in the 10th house right now. That's what's being aspected by Mars. To me, it's also a suggestion that we will be moving into a position where we have to call upon our national resources to support the military troops overseas. And I would not be surprised. I know Obama said he wasn't going to send any more troops overseas, but he makes some statements sometimes I'm kind of surprised at. Like he's made a statement also this week where he said that terrorists will not attack us inside the United States borders. And I thought, that is a bold statement. And I wish that our government could promise that, but I'm afraid that's with the current state of affairs and sort of this guerrilla warfare, that's not possible. They can't be everywhere at every moment. So anyway, at any rate, there's a good chance that our national economy may be transformed somewhat by having to invest in, supporting this continued operation to root out the terrorists overseas. Okay. Let's see, anything else today? Okay, also, it's also as Pluto moves into position, Pluto right now is making a square to Saturn, and it's also that Saturn's making a square to our sun. So there's a T-square happening here as well. So see, as that Pluto slightly shifts into the second house, to me, that's going to activate this whole trigger of events. And to me, it just simply says our sun is in the 7th house of foreign relations or foreign partnerships. Our Saturn is up there in our seat of authority. It's our government. It's our military to a certain extent. It's our ability to be a world power. And it's being squared by Pluto, which is, transiting language. That's power and it's transformation, and it's through war, perhaps. So, I would not be surprised if something like that happens in the next, it's going to be actually very shortly, like towards the end of this year, I believe it's the beginning of January or so. Now, let's see, also to be noted, we've got our transiting Saturn is in Sagittarius, and it's moving through the United States 12th house. So I think I mentioned this on the Sunday video, but that is opposing our national Uranus in Gemini. That's that idea that there are those who are here to perhaps do us harm, radicals and misfits, just of all kinds that are causing they're planning secretly to cause harm. And it could be in many different forms. And what's also exciting about this is this could include as well, this includes those radicals who are more benefic, such as Anonymous or groups that are trying to help, but that aren't necessarily part of the government. Okay, they're just kind of doing it on their own. Transiting Mercury also is, as I said, I mentioned it's in that first house, and because it's in, it's opposite the United States Gemini, which is in our 8th house. Talk of gun control. I mean, that's straight up 8th house is our Scorpio house, traditionally ruled by Mars. Mars is a gun. Mercury in this house in Cancer, it's like protecting your home from others with a gun. So these talks are going to continue. We'll hear more about this on Monday, and it might get somewhat heated. That transiting because that transiting Mercury is going to be making that T-square with Jupiter. So it's going to be and it's also Neptune in the mix. So. Ay caramba, just more of the same, more of this talk of gun control and people being on totally different sides and religious freedoms and security and these things all being topics that are being discussed. Now, as far as ISIS goes, we've got Mars in Libra that's moving into their first house. It's actually into that first house there. That's that painful wound. Okay, I talked about this for Sunday, but also on Monday. This is a painful wound that has been brought to them. It'll be sort of, it looks like when I look at the transiting moon and whatnot, that perhaps it's happening for them in the evening, at nighttime unexpectedly. And also, as it's coming into that first house, it will be squaring the Pluto of Isis and opposing the transiting Uranus and the Isis Uranus, which conjoin one another right now. So that's pretty unexpected. That's a straight up, anytime you see Uranus and Mars making aspects, it suggests an unexpected wound or an unexpected injury or an unexpected conflict, okay, something kind of out of the blue. So yes, it's like lightning at nighttime, literally, bombs and things like that, strikes. Also, though, it could be, because this was originally that Mars was in the 12th house, that's to me like us tactically, very secretly accessing points of vulnerability over there in Syria and locations and targets that that the troops were able to get to successfully privately, and then perhaps once this moves into the first house, them being destroyed, or the fact that they have been compromised, that ISIS sort of finds out about it, that kind of thing. Okay, and here it should be noted, ISIS, it's going to do that. Mars is going to come and conjoin ISIS's Mars. That's the warring spirit. It's going to activate their, which is opposite the Uranus. That's going to activate their desire to, in Libra, to call upon the brothers and sisters to enact warfare and jihad, right? So to me, there's going to be some we're going to see reaction. Okay, this is not good. This is going to be, to me, this is a day of reaction, retaliation. So that's my concern when I look at ISIS's chart relative to the things that are happening on Monday. I see also the transiting Saturn, which is in Sagittarius, and that Pisces Neptune. They create a T-square with the Gemini Venus of ISIS, which I have placed in their 8th house. In the 8th house, Venus in the 8th house for me, with ISIS in particular, because of the nature of ISIS, and this is their chart ruler. 8th house is destruction when you're looking at it from the shadow side, right? It's like death and rebirth. It's the bomb, the explosion. That Venus in this 8th house suggests it's their love of violence and destruction, and it's like literally beheading people. So having this Venus being squared, it's being triggered right now, almost exactly by that transiting Neptune and that 8-degree Saturn. So their delusions and their belief that God is on their side is even more sort of amplified during this period of time, and we're going to see this throughout most of this week. It'll be with an orb this whole week, and also Venus in the 8th house is them celebrating destruction that has happened to other people in other places, and it's in Gemini, so it tells me there's multiples, so there's more than one. I do think they're going to try to carry out several attacks this week on more than one target. Whether they'll be big attacks or not, whether they'll be successful, I'm not sure, but I do see that, to me, there's a suggestion that they'll be carrying them out in multiple places. Transiting Mars, which is in Libra, also, to me, in my mind, when I'm looking at the chart of ISIS, it makes me think of these sort of coalition forces, okay? They're coming together because of the way that all of a lot of the charts of NATO and even NATO's chart, how a lot of the charts look. There's a lot of cardinal, and it's this partnership thing, okay? And it's being enacted upon ISIS's chart. So to me, this is these coalition forces coming. They're moving into position to square the MC and the IC. So the MC of a country, that is the country's status in the world. The IC is their homeland. It's coming. Mars, the warrior, is coming to square that. So this is, and it will be, opposite Uranus. So this is pretty explosive. This is like, again, this idea of being really agile, light on our feet, and secretive in a sense, because it's like Mars by itself is just the warrior with the knife. It could be a single warrior even just coming with a gun, with a knife, a mission, and doing. And with Pluto in the mix down there in Capricorn, Pluto's in the 3rd house. That's their house of communication. It's also their multiple selves. It's their brothers and sisters, as they refer to one another. That Pluto down there is squaring Mars, and it's squaring Uranus. I mean, everything is lining up right on their angular houses. And of course, this is with the time that I gave them, this noon time. But so far, things have really sort of made sense. In fact, when they were congratulating the terrorist attack in San Bernardino earlier this week on Wednesday, they said something about the brave lions. They've referred to the sympathizers as lions. And with this time, the 12 o'clock time, this gives them a Leo moon, which to me feels right. I feel like this is a group that is a Leo moon group because of just because of the way that the transits have sort of had that they've been activated, the things that they've done, and that we've seen activation of that moon of theirs. So at transiting Saturn, it's moving into position along with, of course, the Pisces Neptune. They're creating a T-square opposite the Gemini Venus of ISIS. I think I mentioned this, but this is because it's in the 8th house. This is Venus's money, and 8th house is it's joint resources. 8th house actually rules oil, which is hilarious, right? And the 8th house is Scorpio, which is black, so it's like black market oil. And it's Gemini, so this is multiple sources. They have multiple lines of trade and multiple supporters okay, that they're dealing with. These military attacks are going to be focused on not only hitting those targets, the physical targets, but also rooting out and figuring out the conspiracies, or the collusions that are happening behind the scenes. So the troops that are there aren't just there to physically combat ISIS, but they're there to collect data and information. And I would not be surprised if they were also, like reconnaissance, hiding things to collect information. Of course, that can be done electronically, and we see that with all this Uranian energy. That's also the internet. That's electronic forms of communication. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was happening as well. Now, the ruler of the seventh house of Isis, which is their house we look to see sort of their partnerships with others, is Mars. That's that Libra Mars of theirs. That's why when we see Mars coming to conjoin that Mars, and we saw the moon passing it, which would activate it and emotionally light it up, that's action being taken, okay? To me, this is, they are going to be retaliating. There is going to be some sort of unexpected retaliation and activity that happens most likely on Monday. This whole week is so unpredictable, though. It could seriously be, because it's Uranus. Uranus is a lightning storm. I can't tell you where a lightning bolt's going to hit. I just know there's a lightning storm happening. You probably should go inside, okay? That's the same kind of thing with this sort of a transit. One other thing to note, that's a quicker moving transit, but the moon for this day will be transiting also their north node. That north node in Libra, that is ruled by Venus, which is in their 8th house. And it is also at the same time, so it will be making, like, initially early on, and I believe even, I don't have the ephemeris set, but it's either Sunday or Monday, it's going to trine Venus, which is, of course, that is their income. That is also activating those who would be supporters of them, getting them to sort of rally the troops a bit. But then the moon will come and it will trigger that north node. And that at the same time is going to trine their Mercury, which is in their 9th house, which is foreign. And this to me is, there's going to be some sort of an activation that gets it's a communication of some kind that will get people who are sympathizers that are in foreign places kind of organized and rallied to take some sort of action, okay? So that's to be noted, and that's also something for Monday. And on the other side, there's so many things happening at once. On the other side, also they've got, because this is Mercury and Venus, and because of what these rule and the houses that they rule, we also are seeing their sources of income being hit. Pluto rules their 2nd house, which is their security, and we have that, of course, that's at 12 degrees. So it's receiving a little bit of it's going to be receiving a square. It's got a square from the moon, and Mars will have also, like, it will have squared it on, let's see, Mars is at 14 degrees, so it would have squared it, like over the weekend. So for sure, we have hit their sources of income, and it's like Pluto, 8th house, Scorpio, it's oil. It's just oil. It's oil. It's the ground. It's even bombs in the ground. This type of thing. Okay. It's things that are hidden being exposed. It's if they have underground, any type of underground trade lines, trade routes, those are being hit. Anything that's, again, hidden. Even caves. If there's any kind of caves, I don't even know that Syria. I don't know the geography there very well, but. So at any rate, minerals, these types of things are all ruled by Pluto, Scorpio, and 8th house. They'll be hit. These sources of income. This exact Mercury in Sagittarius, remember Mercury by itself, as a transiting planet, it rules airplanes, cars, transportation, communication, lines of trade, okay? It's transiting Isis's 3rd house. So you better believe that this 3rd house has been activated for them in a positive way, but also this is because now it's opposing their Mercury in their 9th house. Also, you better believe that they are communicating with each other, and that they are planning, and that they are, preparing for, because also you got Jupiter in the 12th, moving through the 12th house of secrets. They're secretly colluding with one another. But on the flip side, it's also us secretly spying on them. And the sun has moved into their 3rd house, which the sun to me is like the rest of the world. They have come into the 3rd house. The sun is making its presence known. I do believe that with that Mars that has moved into a position where it's making a sextile to the sun, that this is like military action being taken on their lines of communication. So I guess I've noted this in several different places, but I definitely think ISIS, we will maybe see some things on the news, I don't know, maybe some video about the bombing that's happened over the weekend, and perhaps, that they retaliate in some way. So I'm, interested to see the news, not out of desire to be morbid, but I just would like to see how this plays out just as an astrologer. Now, also, this is definitely a time for spying, so we'll see more of that. The transiting Saturn Sagittarius also quincunxes the sun of Isis. It's separating by a degree or so. But this is the authority figure. This is, of the world, laying down the heavy hand of their power relative to Isis. So anyway, Monday, yeah, this is the cat and mouse kind of a thing, but we will definitely see some military action taken towards ISIS in Syria, as well as I would not be surprised if we saw multiple attacks internationally by ISIS or ISIS sympathizers, or those who we would associate with those who are terrorist groups. As far as the United States goes on Monday, we've got, important to note, of course, that Jupiter is still conjoined with our Neptune. We still are under this sort of fog. Saturn, the transiting Saturn, is moving to make a conjunction with our ascendant. Saturn, to me, these are those who are hidden. In my mind, as soon as Saturn pops over that ascendant, they will be out in the open. That we will know of a plot that has been being planned. We will see some sort of action being taken by these groups, these militant groups, and those who are colluding and planning to, with their Jupiter Saturnian, way just over the top crazy thinking. These attacks that they've been planning will most likely take place. So, as I'm pulling up the ephemeris here, because I don't have it in front of me, Saturn does move. I believe it's January. Yeah, it'll be like the beginning of January will be when Saturn moves over the ascendant for us here in the United States. So wouldn't be surprised if we saw some action of some kind then. That Saturn will also be at that time making some sort of it'll be making an aspect, it'll make a square to that, or not a square, I'm sorry, a trine to that Uranian, that Aries and Uranus. So it sort of is unexpected, or it could be an organizing of a revolutionary grassroots effort to perhaps enact some sort of change here on American soil, because that Uranus is in the 4th house. And at the same time, we've got Jupiter kind of up in the mix. It is quincunxing Uranus loosely, and it will be squaring loosely that Saturn. So it's just kind of an unstable, it's like expansion, restriction, and revolutionary action all being hit at the same time. And they're in the two are in the mutable signs that are sort of just not very shaped, not based in the realities of this world, based in sort of ideologies. And ideologies are abstract, and they're not necessarily always correct, and they're multiple and bendable, so they're unpredictable, okay? At the same time, let's see, for Monday, we've got the moon is separating, the moon is in Libra, separating away from Saturn. That would have been President Obama's speech on Sunday. Saturn is being conjoined by Mars. Mars is at 14 degrees, same degree as our Saturn, which we talked about. So this is an important, to me, this is an important day, and it's one where most likely if some sort of retaliation happens, I would not be surprised to see some sort of retaliation relative to our government buildings, something in Washington, D.C., something relative to the administration, some sort of a threat, something like that, something that's just not expected. And it is because the sun is in the mix, and Uranus is in the mix in the 4th house, and Mars is in the mix in the 10th house. These are all, it's like something here in America, in the homeland, happening. So it's like we're being activated all over the place. So I just say, I don't believe in paranoia, but I just say keep your eyes open and don't buy into the hype. Let's get the facts first rather than the rumors, and get your facts from the sources. I listen to the police scanner because I want to hear it straight from what's happening on the ground, rather than listening to it filtered through the media or through pundits who have their own agendas. So, all right. So let's move on to Tuesday. What we got going on for us on the next day. Something to be added for Monday. It's possible the ruler of our house, our 6th house in our chart, is our Venus. And the 6th house has to do with, as I said earlier, military personnel. It's the service personnel. It's the ones that are actually there on the ground, whether they're troops or whether they are sort of the auxiliary personnel. That is Venus. It's our Venus in Cancer, and that's going to be trined by the moon on Monday. So I would not be surprised if the Department of Defense is amping up some possible plans to send more troops overseas. Okay, more than just these special ops troops, but actual people, boots on the ground kind of a thing, in an effort to just sort of quickly strike and take care of this Cancer. Okay, so that's to be noted. We may hear something about that on Monday. Tuesday, December 8th, this is a highly polarized day. So as far as the national and the world go, the national news and the world news, the transiting sun will move to trine with the Uranus of Isis, and that's also going to be within an orb or so of our transiting Uranus, making a trine with that as well. To me, this is maybe we'll see some more of a online, maybe perhaps a little bit more of the online action to try and destroy ISIS communication, or perhaps some exposure of ISIS's online presence. The Mercury in Sagittarius is making a square to the North Node in Virgo all this week. So again, this is more of that polarizing, people being on sort of two sides of the fence. The Scorpio moon. We've got the Scorpio moon separating from our Scorpio Venus, but it's going to be moving into position to trine Neptune. So this is this paranoia. This can be people who are, again, it's more of that diluted thinking, emotion-based thinking, reactivity versus logic. And even revenge, extreme thinking. This is Scorpio. It's a Scorpio moon. So this is people, it's this black or white. It's either kill or be killed kind of thing. And I don't mean to be sounding so scary and violent, but I'm just reading what I'm seeing in the chart. And I think the majority of us will be perfectly safe. But this is still climate. This is still things that are happening in the world. And even if it doesn't happen to any of us personally, it's still happening to other people who are innocent, so it's important for us to know about it, I think. Now, also, on this day in particular, you could see a little bit of destabilization with ISIS and some turning. Some of the people in the group turning against the leadership, even some little factions or people breaking off from the leadership, disagreeing with decisions that are being made, or sort of this sense that the central, the efforts that are being made there in Syria, it's kind of like Cancer. It's like we've gone in and we are trying to use our chemotherapy or our radiation to sort of hit this tumor there in Syria, ISIS, but at the same time they're sending off little cells, little splinter cells that are moving away from them, that are operating independently of the tumor. So, and they could be metastasizing elsewhere. We are going to That's happening. That's just the nature of the climate right now. Venus in Scorpio is also squaring the Isis moon. So this is this love of uncovering hidden things, and it's being destroyed. It's destroying their home in a sense, in a highly visible way. So this to me is bombs, obviously. Obviously we're bombing them, right? But we may see something more intense than we've seen so far. A little bit more like destroying the moon is everything from it's even the public. We could hear something about citizens being hit that were innocent, which is very, very sad. It's not their fault. They're hijacked by this group as much as the Muslim religion. So we could see some of that, though, on Tuesday. For the United States, relative to this sort of these relevant issues, we've got Venus and the moon are in Scorpio. They're there in the 11th house. The 11th house has to do with our legislators and with our government, the legislative branch of the government, or like it was the parliament if you were in Britain. So having Venus and Mars there discussing in these topics of Scorpio, which is war and power, and their Venus is money. This is the discussions that have to take place relative to allocating the resources necessary to do the things we need to do to enforce our power, and also to protect our home, because it's Venus, okay? It's the moon. That moon is home, and it's the public, and it's the public's public. Also, there could be some, Moon in Scorpio can be the public mourning. It can be the public in pain. It is making making a trine to Neptune, and that of course also means that it's going to be making a little bit of an aspect of sextiling somewhat that Pluto. It's a 15-degree Pluto, so it's not like an exact sextile, but there's a little Moon, Pluto, Neptune thing happening here. So this could be a day of mourning, a day of people really being shaken up and discussing our security and keeping our homes safe. Just a little bit more of the same of what we've been seeing. Okay, Venus and Scorpio. Now, also, if you look at our chart and you say, okay, in the United States, let's see, where would we look to see our safety and our security? That's our second house. That's our Saturn. That Saturn's at 14 degrees. It is receiving a trine from the sun. So it's like the sun trining our Saturn suggests the world is helping us or supporting us, and also our authority is going out to the world. We're sending our authority and our strength and helping guide and direct this mission. We're sending that out to the world because it's the sun in the first house. So we are definitely taking part actively in participating in fighting ISIS. Uranus, though, being opposite and making it, we also got like Uranus over, it's making this like little funky, it's this unstable. It's like we're there helping, but also we have stuff here happening. It's like things happening in both places. And so I'm glad I'm not the president. I'm glad I'm not in government, because it's just a week where there's going to be a lot of issues that he's going to have to be addressing this week. Let's discuss, though, before I move on to the next day on Wednesday, Tuesday, Monday, this whole week. This is a highly reactive week, and the way that this will apply to you, if you are someone who, as I said, has your sun or your moon in Aries, Cancer, Libra, or Capricorn in the middle degrees, so 14 to 17 or so degrees, give or take. It's the teens. If you've got it in the teens, all the way to 20 degrees, let's say. You're going to have this is going to be a week that you may be triggered. Look at your sun moon midpoint as well. It's an important point to look at. If that's being triggered, like I'm at 15 degree, I apologize, not 15 degree. My Mars is at 15 degrees of Cancer, and I've got a midpoint at 4 degrees of Cancer. So it's going to be triggered this week. That Mars is going to be triggered for sure. This can play out as aggravation. You could have less of a temper. You could be also more apt to sort of be spontaneous or do something that's unexpected that you wouldn't normally do. Maybe a little bit less apt to be responsible this week if you don't have Saturn making any sort of application to your sun or your moon or your Mars to slow you down. So just try not to this week make any big decisions if possible, if you've got this transit landing on top of your planets. I mean, it's highly reactive, and it's also one where Uranus throws in this kind of, I don't care. I just don't care anymore. So when you have the sun talking to Uranus and you have Mars talking to them as well, it's a good time when we do something and make a decision. That's the sun. Make a decision that's very highly independent and we weren't thinking about what we were making, we're really thinking about the outcome. And the moon being in Scorpio can be kind of intense, like where we just emotionally want to do something. And the moon is ruled by, Mars and Pluto, which are also in this mix. So this is this really just not a good time to make a big decision, like relative to relationships. Maybe not a good week to break up with someone. It might just happen. It could be one of those weeks where you just almost compulsively can't not make it happen because you got Pluto in the mix but try to wait, if possible, till this passes. It will pass. It's just a reactive period of time, and a lot of people are going to see a lot of people, with that fatigue that are escaping into the Neptune this week, and the Saturn, and the being parsimonious and sanctimonious, or whatever the word is, and opinionated. And anyway, we shall get through this together. It'll be over shortly, I suppose. It's better to sort of know what's going to be coming down the road and to keep your cool. Okay, do your best to stay out of conflict. All right, especially with Saturn, with that sun moving away from Saturn. This is really when people start shooting their arrows. It's Sagittarius and it's Aries. Okay, don't shoot the arrows. Keep them in your quiver. Okay, on to Wednesday. Wednesday, December 9th. This is a reactive day. This is reaction, retaliation again. Highly hair trigger, electrical, lightning storm, unexpectedly high voltage energies, All of these will be present on this day. It's irritable. It's an irritable time, and it can be sort of irritable energies. Because a lot of our big countries will be affected by this transit, you're going to see leadership all over from, a lot of the, like I said, the NATO leaderships, a lot of the large countries that are part of NATO. You will see them reacting in a way that is a little bit, what's the word? Volatile, all right? U.S. leadership is going to be called into question as well, most likely. Lots of talk about how things are being mishandled. On the national and the world economic and political stage, we've got the moon in Scorpio. It conjoins with the Saturn of Isis of their chart. That is the ruler of their fourth house, which is their home and their homeland, okay? They've got, let me pull up their chart right here so I can read it more clearly for you. They've got Capricorn down on their IC, so that's Saturn, okay? So when we see the moon coming and activating that Saturn, to me, this is a time where perhaps, emotion relative to homeland is going to be really expanded, and it's going to be like, they're going to be responding, okay? It is a time where they will have had, over this past few days, quite a few hits on their homeland, and this is a time emotionally where there is a desire, because it hits that Saturn, which is in a part of that huge, the chart really is actually a very beautiful chart. It's part of that big grand kite of theirs. It's on one corner. On the other corner, you have Chiron. You've got Pluto at the bottom. So this is like the wound has been activated. And up at the top is their sun. And down at the bottom is Pluto. And it's them, Pluto in the third house of like their brothers and sisters. They're all going to be emotionally kind of pulled together to take action. Okay. So this is a day where, and it's international, that sun is in the ninth house. So to me, this is them taking action in a way where they will be calling forth on all of their brothers and sisters to help protect and defend their homeland, okay? Their cause, really. And it's in Scorpio. So their cause is to destroy the world, basically, to destroy the infidels, so that they believe that will help bring about the returning of the Savior. So, zoinks, right? But it's not like anything new. This is just more of the same. But with that, we've got, there's a suggestion that when this happens, that perhaps, because of the time of the day that it happens, that perhaps there will be some small shells or some things perhaps we will have another smaller sort of mission or smaller operation, whatever they call it. I don't know, the military lingo, mission, but something at night. And at the same time, it's almost like ISIS is trying to heal from what has happened the days previous, and there's a little bit of a things being scattered, okay? When the transiting Neptune also, so this is an interesting one. I talked about this earlier. Transiting Neptune trines President Obama's Neptune. I think I said it squares him earlier. I'm sorry. It trines it. And that's in his house, in his second house. The transiting Neptune, that is. So in his second house, it's trining it. So to me, this is kind of like his dream of transforming America, maybe a little bit unclear. And his security, his sense of safety and security could also be a little bit foggy and fuzzy. There's a bit of doubt, kind of like he's under a fog of doubt and lack of vision. It could be a time where he's just feeling like from the suppression he had earlier this year, sort of a sense of his foundations being a little bit shaken. Also, we've got Jupiter is conjoining his natal Mars, which is which is ruled by his Leo Mercury. And Saturn was trining that earlier. So that's what slowed down his responses. That's why he was being very circumspect and very cautious with choosing to take action. And then what was interesting, as soon as that sort of moved away, he makes these comments last week about, these terrorists aren't going to be attacking us here on our homeland. And that's just, I was like shocking that he even said that. That's the opposite of being circumspect. That's being very unrealistic, actually. So, yes. And also transiting Saturn, which is in Sagittarius in the 12th house. It's exactly opposite that United States Uranus in the 6th house, which is in Gemini. 6th house is the house of military. It's the actual people who are in the military, the personnel. Uranus would be freedom fighters. Okay, it's like freedom fighters in Gemini. This is those that are, it's movement also. Transiting Saturn in Sagittarius could, with it exactly opposing it, it kind of holds it back and slows it down. So that's, to me, they're only putting a few troops out right now. When that Saturn moves and it moves into the first house of the United States, I have a feeling that will be when there's a call for more support from the military over there. And I've actually read for a few military personnel members, and their charts have both shown that it shows that they'll be moving, both of them, and internationally. So that to me is like deployment. So I would not be surprised if we did have some troops deployed, or at least, and if not actual ground troops, it would be like a military personnel support personnel that go over there to help with all of the infrastructure that needs to be in place to support the troops that are there, the special ops troops. So we may see that. Anyway, so, overall, I'm sorry, I want to give really great happy news for this week, and, it is what you make of it, but this is just the international weather. And remember, things that we see in mundane astrology on the world stage usually play out a little more extreme. It's like the extreme side of the extreme expression of whatever the transits are. So that's why, as I'm talking about this in your own life, you may just have a week where you have a lot of restlessness, where you have a hard time sticking to a commitment you made, where you perhaps break a commitment that you made to something, where you are just kind of all over the place a little bit. So just kind of a little bit of an electrical, hairy kind of a week. All right, now we've moved on to Thursday, December 10th. Now this is the big day. This is the one that, as I was studying these charts, a couple of weeks ago, this is the day that I was really interested in looking at, because this is when Mars moves into position to exactly oppose Uranus. So this will create a Mars-Uranus-Pluto T-square. Pluto and Uranus are not exactly squaring one another, so it's not an exact T-square, but because Mars and Uranus in transits many times signify military action or conflicts that come about that are volatile and unexpected, I was interested in seeing where this fell. So, of course, I wanted to see how this affects our nation, how it's going to affect all of us personally, and on the world stage, what we might see on this day. Okay, so here, Thursday, we've got the transiting moon. It's in Scorpio, all right? It is in our national chart. It's moving through our 12th house. Remember, moon in Scorpio has to do with extreme emotion. In the 12th house, this is the public perhaps being afraid and unsure about what is actually going on, okay? This fear factor thing is kind of going to be an issue this week, because it's just like when you're a kid and you hear a lightning storm outside and it's nighttime. Scorpio's night. It's scary. Like you don't know. You don't know what's going on. You don't know what to expect. So it can bring up those emotions that you feel afraid, you feel frightened. So, this is a time where we will be experiencing some of that. And at the same time, you're going to hear a lot of people trumpeting the sort of spiritual call. Like, it's okay. This stuff is, sort of God will protect us, and you're going to hear religious folks and spiritual people sort of getting onto their soapboxes and preaching. So that's going to be happening too this week. Thursday, sort of in particular. We also have the North Node. This is that polarizing of people, those rigid lines causing factions to rise up, especially those people secretly who might like to do harm to the United States. Okay, the transiting Jupiter on Thursday, remember it's conjunct the United States, Neptune, in the 9th house, that house of foreign international relations, also that house of our mythology, our sort of like, it's like our national, like I said, it's our national myth, and it's our ideology about what it means to be an American. It's the American dream. You've got Jupiter expanding that and causing us to focus on it. And at the same time, you have transiting Mercury coming to form a T-square with this. So we're talking about it more, as I've discussed earlier in the week. And this is actually separating at this point. So it's just kind of more of the same. But this is that activation of the national myth. Mercury and Jupiter, mutually receptive. As I said, this lines up with the national Mars, because our national Mars is at 21 degrees of Gemini, okay? So that means our Gemini Mars in the 7th house, this house of international relations, this is the house of our partnerships internationally. It's squaring our Neptune and Jupiter. And then you've got Uranus, I'm sorry, not Uranus. You've got Mercury over there in Sagittarius on the the tail end. So this whole week, this formation is in place, and it's just kind of continuing. Luckily, it's separating at this point. Mercury will be moving into Capricorn, and that's when discussions get a little more serious, and this is when the authority figures kind of step in, and we're going to really see some, well, we're the bosses and we're going to take action now. So, it feels to me too, it's going to feel a little bit more almost militaristic in language. So that'll be shortly. Okay. Now, also, on the national world stage, we've got the transiting moon in the early stages of Sagittarius, and it's moving into our 12th house. This is going to be joining Saturn and Sagittarius. This can be, again, public mourning for the United States, and it's also a demand for a solution. We've got the transiting moon, which has moved into Sagittarius. It's moving into position to form a new moon, which will be on Friday, but it will transit and it will conjoin the transiting Saturn in the 12th house. This is a time of, Saturn is, like I said, this is fears. You put the moon there, this exacerbates them. It can also be a time of mourning even. The Saturn right now is sitting at about 8 degrees of Sagittarius. So that Saturn is making an aspect where it's opposing Uranus, and it's been doing that sort of for most of this week. Having the moon come there, it can sort of make this more of an emotional time where people are doing things secretly. And this to me is almost even people that are natives, like Americans, reacting to what's happening and doing stupid things. I wouldn't be surprised if there were attacks on mosques and things like that on this day, sort of a reactionary response. Also, Mars is conjunct Saturn still, as it has been. So it's in that formation where Saturn does represent it represents the government, the administration, represents the capital, and it represents the administrative branch of our government. So when you have Mars there, this is pain. Mars and Saturn together create pain. And that's why I said earlier, like if there were threats on President Obama's life, I would not be surprised if they hadn't happened already, if they happened on Thursday. I mean, this whole week, I'd like to sort of pinpoint a day, but we have things that are volatile happening each day, so it's hard to say when, these exact things are going to be happening. The transiting Mars, which is in Libra, of course, this to me, as we're looking at the United States charts, it represents a few things. It represents us relative to our coalition with other nations in this effort, this military effort, but it's also represents the terrorists, in particular ISIS, because their Mars is in Libra. As this Mars moves on Thursday, it's going to move into our first house, into the light, opposite Uranus, which is rebels or unexpected events, as I've been saying, and which is in the 7th house of partnership, which is squared by Pluto, which is in Isis's 3rd house, which is brothers and sisters, communication, multiple powerful attacks, revenge for weekend attacks by U.S. troops. Mars will then activate the ISIS Mars. It's going to move and it's going to conjoin their Mars. I've talked about this already. So to me, Thursday is really a day where we could see something here in the United States in particular. Transiting Mars, which is in Libra, if we look at the chart of Isis, it is moving into the 1st house of Isis, and it will be conjoining their Mars on Thursday. It's actually, what is it? We were at 16, it's like a degree away, so it's approaching their Mars. Mars and Libra, again, this is collaborating, and because Mars is conflict, so would be their terrorist collaborators or sympathizers opposite Uranus, their Uranus in their Isis chart, which is conjoined to the transiting Uranus, which is making a T-square down to Pluto and the transiting Pluto. So, we see this repeated. The day that they announced their caliphate, everything has moved back into position, okay? So, quite a powerful formation, important and powerful day for ISIS. So to me, this is definitely a day where I think something's going to happen relative to ISIS and something that they will actually take credit for. And also at the same time, we've got the Uranus, the transiting Uranus, which to me in this particular instance represents the internet, conjunct the Isis Uranus, as I said. It's also trine the transiting sun, which is the Sagittarius sun, which is the world, and that's falling into the third house of Isis. So this tells me that they are going to communicate to the world some sort of a video. Story will be spoken with words of authority. I'm reading my notes, sorry. Of authority on behalf of the homeland or Islam. Praising actions that have been taken by their brothers and sisters. So to me, they're going to praise actions. I think they're going to take credit for the actions that are taken, but it's going to be done by people perhaps in multiple places. Transiting Venus, which is in Scorpio, of course. That's life and death values being placed on transformation. Okay, trining Isis's Cancer sun, which is in their ninth house. That's their religious sort of belief that they are the authority figures of Islam. And it's also trine Neptune in Pisces, which is in their fifth house. That's their deluded beliefs. So this is celebration of Isis's role as the chosen leader to transform the land into the land of the chosen, the land that is worthy of God's return or the Savior's return. Transiting Venus also is in Scorpio, and that is trining the United States Jupiter. Okay, so if you remember from the United States chart, we've got our Jupiter. It's loosely conjoined to our Sun in the seventh house. Jupiter is your ideals. As a country, it's our ideal. It's in Cancer, so it's like our homeland. It's our ideal of our patriotism. When you have Venus making a nice little trine to it, it amplifies that. But it also can kind of make us a little bit more perhaps war hungry in a sense. And it's got Neptune at the bottom in Pisces making a grand trine. So this is, what I'm saying, this is like a little bit, to me, this is people getting a little bit excited about and a little hawkish and a little, like wanting to protect our country. That's what I'm trying to say. Let's see. Also, transiting North Node is in Virgo. It quincunxes the Aquarius moon of the United States chart. This also tells us the public being divided. We are divided. We just, emotionally, we don't really, we come from two very different places. It's a very large country. Obviously, just the simple geography of our country, the physical size of our country. And the variety that comes with that. And we are a country that's made up of people from many cultural backgrounds. Of course, we've kind of melded into this American culture, but there doesn't matter. This is a country of immigrants. And so it's us, them. There's a big us, them thing happening right now, and that will continue. Transiting Saturn and Sagittarius is still in our 12th house, of course. So that's continued that unrealistic, deluded thinking, or the sense that there's a lack of leadership. Saturn being leadership, having it in the 12th house, perhaps it's missing, waiting for leadership to do something. And it's also those hidden people, again, that are there that would like to do us harm, still in that same formation, okay? Personally, this is the day we have Sagittarius. On the very next day, on Friday, will be a new moon. So let's talk about how this will affect us personally when we get onto Friday. But overall, this day, other than the moon, this is a day that's, again, the same as before. It's a day that's reactive, it's emotional, it's a little hair trigger. So just kind of sit tight, and make it through Thursday onto Friday. On Friday, we have our new moon. I'm actually going to sort of end the forecast here. For the rest of the week, for Friday and Saturday, we have things separating. Okay, so to me, again, this is kind of the cooling down. Monday, Thursday, those are kind of the days that, really Tuesday, Wednesday too, but like Monday and Thursday were the days where things kind of came more exact. Friday, we do have a new moon in Sagittarius, and Sagittarius is, it will be, believe it'll be at around, I got to pull up the ephemeris here, what is it, around 18 degrees or so, if I remember correctly. I think it's around 18 degrees, yeah. So having a new moon in Sag is ultimately optimistic, right? Having the moon there means this is a rebirth of a sort. It's a time to start fresh and to start over. Because Sagittarius right now is ruled by Jupiter in Virgo, that is not a really great placement for for Jupiter. Sorry, my brain. Jupiter does not really like to be in Virgo, okay? They're really different from one another. Virgo is about being a little more realistic. It's a little more cynical. It's dealing with facts. Jupiter likes to just look at the big picture and, go for something. Go for it, So our sun, although it's Sagittarius sun, it is being informed by that Jupiter, and it's not the typical sort of, if you just had a pure Sagittarius, if you had a Sagittarius sun and you had a Jupiter in Sagittarius, let's say, then you'd have a pure Sagittarius sun. But it's a little bit more critical. It's a little bit more self-righteous. It's a little bit more opinionated in a sense, I suppose. And it worries more than the typical Sagittarius sun. So this is a time where if this is affecting you, if it's hitting you, I've had so many mutable signs, tons of Geminis lately, because they're being affected by the sun, of course. It's opposing their sun or their moons, if they're Gemini moons as well. And of course, they're being affected by Jupiter, and they're being affected by Saturn. All these transiting planets are directly affecting their suns or their moons, these Sagittarius sun, moon, and rising people. So, Gemini rather. So if you're a mutable sign, if you are Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, Pisces, you're being affected by the cosmic weather as well, just like the people who are the cardinal signs. But for you guys, it's a little different. For you, it's affecting you. It's like your ideology. What do you believe? What's your dream? What's your in your life? What's the part of your life that's been a fantasy that you've been living out, that you've had to sort of face reality? Okay. Now, all of us have mutable signs somewhere in our chart, if not by planetary placement, that we have it as the cusp of a house. So this will tell you, just look at your birth chart and see where these planets are falling. Where is the fantasy for you, this sort of dream that you've had, being a little bit battered about, and you're sort of having to look at the fantasy realistically, okay? For the United States, it's been affecting us. It's been affecting our fantasy and our dream of who it is we believe we are as a country. Our ideology, our fantasy, or our American dream is being questioned right now. So look at how it affects you, and then go from there. It's a time of growth. This is a period. All times in life have high side and low side. So I know I focus more on sort of the world events from a perspective of terrorist attacks or things that we'll see in the news. You don't need to feel afraid, of course. This is a time of growth. And to me, ultimately what's going to happen here, this is a very good time. It's a time for America to get clear about what it is who it is we are. We are a very young country relative to the other larger superpowers in the world, and there's a diverse population here. I think we need to get to a place where we say, maybe it's okay that we have different opinions. And that's really hard right now with our Saturn in Sagittarius and our Jupiter in Virgo, because they kind of don't really agree with that. It's this idea that, well, my religion is the correct one, yours is not. Or my way of living, my idea, my point of view, my perspective is correct, and yours, not so correct. But we got to move through this period to get to a place where it's like, okay, hey, guess what? Maybe we're both right. Maybe we're all on the same team here, okay? When we're being attacked by people who would like to do us harm, whether it's us or other countries that are allies of ours who are being attacked by malefic forces, maybe it's time for us to say, look, let's talk about humanity as a whole. What is it that's broken? What is broken that is causing people in the United States to pick up a gun, to go to a place where there are innocent children, women, families, people that don't have guns, schools, theaters, churches, etc., abortion clinics, whatever, Planned Parenthood, whatever, hospitals, and kill people? Kill them, just cold-blooded. What is broken in your brain that causes that to happen? And it's not just happening here, there, every now and then. It's every day in this nation right now, as of this past year, right? So, to me, the deeper issue, and as Virgo, we've just had this North Node, which represents, remember the North Node, that world axis represents the poles. And it's in Virgo right now, so it's retrograding in Virgo. It's going to go back into Libra. And here's what I think is broken. I think our inner masculine and feminine on a microcosm, individually, is what's broken, especially in the United States. Through feminism, I think feminism was a good thing. I think it's good that women have the freedoms now that afforded to that they didn't have before, perhaps. But it's been at the expense of creating this culture where we have been shamed, where if you're a woman and you fall in love with someone and you feel a sense of need and you want to feel safe and you want to know where you stand with this person, you want to have that relationship talk, right? It's like, it's not allowed. You are shamed for being needy, right? You're clingy. All these labels are placed upon you, when really all it is biologically, the woman was the one that had to carry the infant in utero for 9 months and then had to have the baby at her breast for about a year or so plus, and was vulnerable to attack. And she is weaker than the man, right? The man was the one that, in our culture right now, men aren't being allowed, they're being shamed when they want something, especially when they want, for example, from their partner, their female partner, when they want sex, right? Like this idea of a man just ravishing his woman and saying, treating her in a way where he is in a sense treating her like a sex object, that is looked down upon in our culture. And it's been sort of twisted. And so men are emasculated in all kinds of ways actually, but then men are having to sort of swallow that and keep that aggression inside of them. It's coming out. It will come out somehow. It will come out unconsciously, and it will come out through behavior like violence. The violence that we see with guns, which is a phallic symbol. Like it's also symbolic and so obvious. So on the microcosm, you're seeing it also on the macro. You're seeing it with our politics in the United States, the extreme polarity that we have right now. Republicans hold space as a masculine entity, right? Democrats hold space as a feminine entity. They're divorced right now. They're like a fighting divorced couple. Okay, and it's because on the microcosm, we are all divorced inside of ourselves. Our masculine and feminine are so divorced from one another in general in our culture that it expresses itself on the larger stage. So we get that fixed, that's going to fix all of these other issues. It's going to at least greatly improve them. This is not, in my mind, about gun control. In my mind, I could have access to any kind of gun. I wouldn't go shoot people, right? There are plenty of people who could have access to guns and would have no desire to go out and shoot someone. There's a deeper systemic issue, and it's not necessarily about the laws that are in place, okay? I do think that I don't think it's necessary for us to have like semi-automatic weapons. But look, if semi-automatic weapons are legal or people can get access to them and they could come and kill people, shouldn't people be able to defend themselves with arms of a comparable caliber or whatever? I don't know. I'm not a gun person, but you know what I'm saying? So I don't really have an opinion on this necessarily. To me, this is going to be discussed, and it's the deeper psychology. Look at the deeper underlying issues in the way that our most basic archetype of what it means, the god and the goddess, the mother, the father, those two entities have been divorced from each other and they're facing away from one another and they need to be together. That's oneness. That initial oneness inside of us, I know it sounds simplistic, but that's what's going to help us as a nation come together. Look at the people through the history, throughout time, the bloodiest wars and the bloodiest just atrocities typically are done in the name of religion. And religions many times make very clear delineations and distinctions about these sexes. Okay, and many times you have one of the sexes being placed in a position of inferiority. And then you have sublimation of emotion, and it comes out in very unexpected and unhealthy ways. So we need to get over this and get past this. We need to heal this wound of gender, this wound of the polars, the poles that we have inside of us. It's very basic. Anyway, that's enough of my preaching. That was my Saturn Sagittarius moment. Okay, hope you guys have a fantastic week, and have no fear. Everything serves to further. And see you soon. If you'd like a personal reading, go ahead and give me a message and we'll get you set up. Okay, thanks. Have a good one. Bye-bye.